Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dancing into Brain Health podcast. I am your host, Magda Kaczmarska. Brain health is not merely the absence of disease, it's the sum of our physical, emotional, social, and cognitive well-being. Designing social and physical environments that support brain health as we age is essential to ensuring dignity, autonomy, and security across the lifespan. In today's episode, we are joined by Macarena Espina Díaz, whose work centers on building precisely these kinds of supportive environments. With a focus on inclusivity and human-centered design, she cultivates social and physical spaces that uphold dignity and enhance quality of life for people living with dementia. Through inclusive design, she invites us to consider how each of us can engage more intentionally with our physical and social spaces to support brain health for all. Maca received her Industrial Design Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Chile. She has completed several courses and diplomas from different universities on the topics of accessibility, neuropsychology, and aging. Maca founded the Viviendo con Demencia y Más de Estudio de Diseño, or Living with Dementia R&D Design Studio, in which she is the director. She has joined several work groups and projects aimed to research and develop solutions for people living with dementia, disabilities, and older adults. Welcome, Macarena, Maca. It's an incredible honor to speak with you. Thank you so much for taking time to join me in conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. I know it's going to be a good one.
I'm so excited too. I'm privileged that many of the people who have joined our podcast today are people that I have met personally. And you are definitely one of those. We first met when you were completing your fellowship with the Global Brain Health Institute,
Yes.
Trinity College Dublin. I had seen you in sessions, but the first time we had the chance to really chat was when we sat together at a pub in Dublin. And you've been a part of so many projects that are so complex and require balancing very nuanced and very complex ideas. And yet you are the most grounded and incredible individual and incredibly talented. I'm also honored that you've joined us and brought some of your talents to our projects in New York with Dance Stream projects. Selfishly grateful to have a chance to chat with you and learn about some of these things that you've done. But also for our listeners to get a chance to learn from you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, the way you describe me is, I sometimes I don't see myself like that. You're the best. Like it's refreshing.
I was wondering if we could start, and I actually don't know if we've ever had this conversation as friends, as colleagues.
Mhm.
You know, the work that you do, not just being interested in brain health and brain sciences and dementia, that already I feel is unique. Like, how did you get to that? But also, what's unique to me about your journey is this interconnection of design, which balances really intentional, systematic thinking with artistic talents, which I know you're an exceptional artist as well, bringing support and collaboration with very disparate communities. What first sparked your interest in brain health or brain sciences and dementia? Maybe let's start there. And then I'd love to see how did you get into this work and design, specifically this form of collaborative design?
Well, I'm gonna start with design. So I am an industrial designer. I studied design in the University of Chile. And we had this course on ergonomics, and the professor there was very like accessibility focused. Well, ergonomics is it's by nature, I think, a discipline that looks into accessibility and inclusion and those related topics. And so I think she was very crucial for my interest in the topics. And then I started working with her. as a research assistant. I never thought I was going to. Actually, I clearly remember saying to a classmate, "Oh, these topics are so difficult. Why do we have to learn it in such a, in such a deep way? I'm never gonna work in ergonomics anyway." I remember saying that. Then I ended up working with her as a research assistant in several projects of her and with other people from the Housing Institute in the University of Chile. And then I started my interest in housing as well, like inclusive housing or environments and that kind of stuff. And then, well, that's the design part. And then my grandmother had dementia at the same time when I started college. She started developing Alzheimer's, to be specific. And yeah, by the end of my studies, I was looking for something to do. I mean, not the final year, just a year before, because we had this methodology and training and in research and that kind of stuff. And so I saw something in the environment that my grandmother was living in, because she was living in a long-term housing, like for older adults. And I don't want to be too negative about it, but it wasn't adapted for people living with dementia. Even though I didn't know so much about dementia yet, I did know about accessibility and inclusivity, and so I saw how the environment could be a determinant for their well-being. And so when I had the opportunity, I took the topic with some classmates, two of them, we were three, and we did this very small project for one semester about how color and shapes can influence your wayfinding. And it was very interesting. Even though it was a small project, very small research, I think we got very good feedback about what we did. And then when I had to do my final project to get my degree of industrial design, I decided to go with the same topic. And so I got deep in it, and it was great. I learned so much, a great amount of information I learned about dementia, Alzheimer's, and environments was from that period of time. So yeah, it's kind of like, sometimes you think that is a straight line, but not necessarily. You have to do the connections somewhere, and sometimes it's not that obvious, not that linear. Because I could have and ended up doing whatever other design project, designing, I don't know, chairs, tables, and lighting, I don't know, 3D printing, that kind of stuff. But I ended up there just because of very specific things that happened when I was studying. And so I think it's wonderful.
Initially responding to that, obviously, when we think back, the line might feel a little clearer, but in the moment, it doesn't always feel that clear. And you were talking about how color and shape helps support weight finding for people living with dementia, but I think in that same light, when we're trying to navigate and figure out a path for our career, especially when we have the kind of minds like yours, where maybe following a path that feels very clear may not be the one that feels most satisfying. I'm curious if you had experienced that. I think I strived to find some paths that existed that I could follow. And I found in the end that I needed to forge a new path that was more satisfying. Does that feel like that resonates for you?
I think it does, because in my case, and I have to say this, not many people are working in this topic, like in this mix, like design and environments and people living with dementia, or accessibility as a general topic. And so I think it wasn't easy, and it still isn't easy. but I think it is way more satisfying. I get frustrated a lot and I think, wow, why would I do this? I have little support sometimes and I have to fight my way in some circles, but still I think I am able to recognize that I'm doing a good job, which is very difficult. And that I'm doing something that's good, that is beneficial for people that have many needs and sometimes people that are vulnerable. So
Yeah. I've had a chance to witness that when we, as part of the Atlantic Institute, we had a chance to go to Chile, and I had an opportunity to witness, some of the relationships that you've cultivated in Santiago, with a community in Cerro Navia. We have had many conversations, and I see you as somebody who has a deep felt sense of justice and and a need for enhancing and ensuring equity and really shining a light on things and communities that may not have been seen or witnessed or recognized. And very gently, but also very steadfastly demanding that we look and that we engage and we listen. Do you see that in yourself? And do you feel that is that part of the reason that you continue to that drives your work?
I find myself demanding a lot of times. Like, we should do this way, we should look into this or that. And I have the feelings that sometimes that might be pain me for like in front of other people as a little problematic.
Hmm. I
Uh-huh.
actually feel whether it comes to working with people living with dementia, witnessing and hearing from individuals living with dementia, the level of stigma that they experience and the obstacles that present themselves either in our perceptions or in our environments that really make their life challenging. And I feel like knowing that there's somebody like yourself who's unwilling to let other people turn an eye or an ear and not
Mm.
listen. I think that is a huge gift. Delighted that you're problematic. I'm curious, is there something about your upbringing or your background or an example that you found that kind of fueled or instigated the sense of justice in yourself? It,
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing because well, I grew up in a very broken family. So I've been fighting for a long time
Mm.
in different aspects of my life. I'll have to fight for whatever it is. And so when I see these kinds of injustices, because this is, as my professor used to say, this is not vulnerable people. These are vulnerated
Mhm.
people, people with dementia and their families. When their needs are not met as they should, I feel like it's happening to me for some reason. Or I put myself in the situation of living like them or experiencing what they are experiencing. And I think that also has a lot to do with studying design because basically you have to be the user.
Mm.
You have to put yourself in the position of the user or in the shoes of the user to understand them. So yeah, I think it's a mix. I've had a very particular life, and then I studied design. Maybe if I didn't study design, it will be a different story. But I think these are two things that are very crucial for how I am
Mm.
or how I feel regarding these issues. Also, I think Chile in particular has a very unique story. As a country, we dealt with very difficult issues in the past and in the present. Well, as every country, but I think there are some events that have shaped the way that people like me, my age probably, um, think. In my case, I was a generation of students that will be in the streets a lot, demanding, protesting. We had a very active political engagement, if you will. So I think it's a mix of all those things. Sometimes I feel, and this is nothing to do with brain health, probably, but sometimes I feel like the youth today um, are a little bit disconnected with this sense of justice. I think they're more quiet than we were, and that it's a little bit scary because we need another generation of fighters because of everything that's going on. Who's gonna fight for us when we are older?
Hmm.
I mean, we will probably still be fighting, until we die. But we need that the younger generations also get involved. Like they see the issues, they want to help. They want to change things. Being revolutionary. As Salvador Allende said, like being young and not being revolutionary is just unnatural. Not in those exact words, but you get it.
Yes. I have had the privilege of meeting some individuals, some of whom are working with us now, others who I've engaged with in certain short engagements, whether it's with the United Nations, NGO Committee on Aging, where there's young persons who are wanting to become these global leaders. They're really interested in
That's
policy.
awesome.
There's a whole phenomenal movement with Lorenzo's House that's based out of Chicago that's just started this next gen movement, which is a global community of younger persons.
That's
There's some of
amazing.
them are younger than 20 even, who are advocating for dementia justice. So I think it's
Wow.
there, and I feel like your words probably will resonate with them very strongly. And maybe that's what we need is so much of this. It's difficult, I think. It definitely has happened, but I think it's difficult to stand up when it's just you and it feels like it's only you that has these ideas. You can have revolutionary ideas inside but not express them, and it sometimes that knowing that you're not alone is really what instigates the
Yeah.
spark for you to act.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that build community
Mhm.
when you are in school or you are studying in general. You are always with your classmates. You are always being in the community. I think that probably because I now I live in the countryside. I in a very kind of remote rural area. I don't see that community that I used to
Mm,
see anymore. And as I said, Chile, a few years ago we had a very particular uprising and that left us a little bit, I don't know, damaged, I
mm,
think, like tired
mhm,
probably too. Like sometimes you have the sense that you don't want to get involved anymore because it will lead nowhere. Like
mhm,
this sense of desperation,
mm,
which I feel it too. And so building communities now, I think it's a struggle
yeah.
every day. But I'm so glad to hear that you're still doing it and you're still
Hmm.
talking to each other and organizing. Yeah, it's amazing.
What I'm hearing you say, as I was listening to you earlier and talking about inclusive design, it sounded to me, as like you're defining empathy essentially, having to consider and place yourself into another person's shoes. You have to become the user in order to
Mhm.
design. And in that case, you're kind of talking about physical environments, right? Built environments, the objects that we surround ourselves with. But then there's also that social environment, and both of them contribute to our
Yes.
collective well-being. And you were mentioning that initially what drew you, witnessing your grandmother's experience and how the space in which she was living was uh, was not determining a lack of well-being for her. You obviously have a design background. You have this interest in studying neuropsychology. To me, it feels like as part of your work, even without a training as a psychologist, you have to be able to balance this understanding of human internal dynamics and kind of intrapersonal dynamics as well as the environment. And that I think translates very strongly to brain health, right? We know that brain health
Yeah.
is a combination of all of these different environments. Um, what how would you exactly define inclusive design? Or am I using the right words to define that? Is that the right terminology?
Yeah, inclusive design. Well, there's different stances when it comes to inclusive design, or what is inclusive, what is accessibility, what is universal design. And it depends on your own views sometimes as a designer. Where do you stand? I chose to look at things from the perspective of inclusive design because first mentor and professor of ergonomics put it is a way in which you design for people, not for everyone, not one size fits all, but in a way that you can design for everyone, but with different considerations, looking at the specific needs of certain groups or certain people without having to design that for a big like a group of people. That's the way I see it, like a way of designing that it's for everyone if you look
Yeah.
at different people, but one design is not for everyone.
Yeah.
Sounds a little like
But yeah, it makes a
because
complete sense. Yeah.
and especially working now in this inclusive design for people living with dementia, even if you pick one type of dementia like Alzheimer, you want to design something, you still have to adapt it for different people with Alzheimer's, because the disease or the syndrome will not manifest in the same way in one people or another. So even if you have the same type of dementia and you are in the same stage, you're still gonna have different ways of using the environment, different ways of responding to stimuli
Yeah.
of the environment, or different ways to relate to other people. Yeah, I think that's the way in this case.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that really is very contrary to many of the ways that I hear people speaking about this. I think we conflate efficiency with utility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just because something is efficient and we think that we identify a solution and it works, is it actually going to really work? Or is it going to skim the surface and work, this amount for everybody, maybe this much for one person? What you're saying really is that we need more personalized, nuanced
Yes.
approaches that are maybe perhaps more relational, and that takes more time.
Sadly, that is a way, like an important way in which value is measured. Even when you apply for research funds, for pilot project funds, sometimes the cost effectiveness of your proposal it has a lot of weight. And so you have to think about ways in which you can present it, which is very sad, because I think that well-being should be enough. But we live in a world where resources are scarce. So I guess that's a fair way to distribute resources. It's not ideal, but sadly, it's the way that we build our world. Yeah. And I was gonna say, when it comes to environmental design, you don't have to adapt every single thing. For example, I was thinking, well, I was listening to you, that most of the recommendations, because these are all recommendations. Like you can either apply it and it might work, it might not work. But most of the recommendations that we do are very general, like they can be adapted, and we create it that way so people can have some agency too in the way they want to um, They want to disorganize their environment. For example, when we say you use bright colors, colors that will reflect lighting better, but we don't say use red, use blue, use whatever color, because that depends on what colors the people like, you know? The same with textures, like avoid textures that are problematic for the person, not specific textures. We don't talk about specifics in that case. And so I think most of the recommendations are written like that. And that's very helpful because you can take the recommendation and apply it in the way that is helpful for you.
Mm-hmm.
And those results are going to be different for everybody. So yeah. I think it's a very efficient way of presenting the recommendations, so everybody can relate to them, but in a different way.
I keep on coming back to something you said earlier, speaking about working with people living with dementia. You said, I think maybe it was your professor, that these individuals aren't vulnerable. They're made vulnerable. Yeah, I like the word. You made up a
Yeah.
word, vulnerated.
Oh,
I love it.
is that a word?
It's
That is
not,
not
but
a
it
word.
should be. We have been, not in English at least, but at least I don't think it is, but I love it. I think we should make it a word because it exactly articulates what it is. What you're addressing, it's that relationality, it's that social aspect of vulnerability. We perceive somebody as being vulnerable, but in fact we are contributing to their well-being plummeting. What we really should be addressing is an unmet need that we have not trained ourselves to see or to hear. And then as a result, that is the gateway to changing something in an environment or in a dynamic that can shift. And it's fascinating, when I think about many of the conversations that we've had, especially with artists who work with people living with dementia, that is the approach that they have expressed.
Yeah, and also you put yourself in front of people not from a higher ground, but at the same level as them. And this is something that I actively do. I'm very conscious about it and I prepare for it. It's not casual. The way I dress, the way I talk, the way I joke with them when I'm interviewing, when I'm taking photos of their environment, because they're opening their space, their personal, very intimate space, their bathrooms, their bedrooms, their kitchens, all the space in which they live, they do life. And so you have to be like them, talk like them, look like them, and become them. I'm probably repeating myself, but yeah, and it's very important because if not, people don't trust you. They won't tell you stuff that are important. They won't let you take pictures, not pictures so you can have them for malicious purposes, but to analyze, so later you can come back with recommendations for them to work on. I think that's very important. I talked about it with my team too, because I don't work alone. I go to interviews with people from my team. We are professionals. We use sometimes a different language, but when we talk to people, we use not professional language. We use
It's
coloquial.
colloquial, yeah. That's it. How do you spell in Spanish? How do you
Language.
spell in Spanish and Espanol?
Coloquial. Coloquial. Yeah. Coloquial. Yeah. Yeah. And actually it's more fun because it's more relaxed. You're not trying to impress people. You're just there because you need them to do your project and they need you in a way because I mean they don't know they need you most of the time. They need you to do a good job.
Yeah, that's such an important and very difficult skill. I think for some rare individuals it comes naturally, but I think for most of us it's a learned and practiced approach. Listening to you, it's it, it's exactly that trust, I think, is vital, and meeting people. I've heard people say meeting people where they are. I also like that you spoke about language, right? And that language translates in our bodies, in the words that we use, but even in how we dress. I think that's so important. And you're the first person, I think, who's actually articulated that. So I wanted to speak in our show notes. We have people who are interested. We have a lot of the projects that you've engaged with. Um, they're really brilliant, and all of them, from what I perceive, have required kind of multi-stakeholder groups to support some sort of a design, whether that's with academics, with municipal governments, and obviously with individuals and communities. All of that to address some of these gaps in care and support and built environment. Obviously, you've worked with a lot of communities, but a lot of this work has been with exclusively people living with dementia. I know that there's a few, like the Living with Dementia toolkit that folks can access. We have both English and Spanish links in the show notes. There's a wonderful toolkit you've just recently translated to English about supporting healthy eating for people living with dementia that's also in the show notes. But I'm wondering if we could speak about the pilot, because you mentioned a little bit of coming to people's homes. You're currently living in a rural environment in Chile. Can you paint for us a little bit of a picture of what the experience is for people living with dementia in urban versus rural Chile? And speak about how some of this project that you're working on right now in collaboration with those communities?
I'll start by saying that most of the recommendations that we've worked on the whole time we've been doing this, both myself as an individual, as a professional, and then with the studio, has been developed in urban areas. And there are not many recommendations or studies being done in this specific topic, which is environment for people living with dementia, based on rural areas. And that's a
Mm,
problem because Chile, at least, is a country that will have a lot of rural areas and a lot of people live in rural areas. And this happens in many countries. Sometimes services and resources are very centralized. And so you find a better quality of life in urban areas. And what we see in Chile in particular and in rural areas is that there's more poverty and less services in general. So you can guess that people with dementia and their carers are living with more vulnerability in rural areas than in urban areas. And so I
mm,
think at the time I thought when I applied for my pilot project that this is what I should do. Also because I live in a rural area and this is what I'm seeing. The level of needs is greater
mm.
when it comes to health, mental health, brain health in general. And brain health is a very complex and systemic topic, concept issue.
Yeah.
It's many things. And so, if you think about all the things that affect brain health, you'll find that many of them will be greater in the rural areas,
Mm,
especially when it comes to building community and isolation. For example, there's been a lot of migration from rural areas to urban areas. So now older people are staying in the countryside
mm,
alone, and you see it in your neighborhood. I have just one neighbor. By the way, he lives alone. He's an older person. And
mm,
many people that we encounter every day are older people, which families are living in the big cities. And
mm.
so when it comes to community, like people are disappearing. Now there's more people coming because of COVID-19, like us that are living in here, but it's still building. So I think you cannot call it a tight community, like when
Mm,
people know each other, and do stuff together. And then you have services like water, electricity, which are very basic, but in some communities they don't even have that
mm,
because it's too expensive to get there with electricity, and the companies will charge you for it, or you have to apply for a project that will take years. And so those are the issues that you're seeing. That's poverty in general, but it affects people living with dementia more, and their carers more. Transport, for example, public transport, which is sometimes is not existent in
mm,
some areas. So you have to rely on other people, or you have to have a car, and some people don't have cars, or some people don't have licenses to drive. So then you have the problem of isolation again,
yeah.
you know? So yeah, That's what we're seeing in this project. We are almost at the end of the project now. We already did interventions. Now we are waiting a little bit to see if they are helpful or not, and hopefully they will. We still have to do the post-intervention interviews to see how well we did with what we implemented in each house, in each home. And as sometimes say, you're not just dealing with environments that are not adapted for people living with dementia, environments that are not adapted for everybody
Yeah.
to live in them,
Hmm.
um, which is a huge problem for projects like this, especially because it's so small and it's so little what you can do. Hopefully, when we have the results, we can bring the results to people who decide things
Yeah.
in the community and say we need this or that, and hopefully they will have some funds or resources to apply to maybe ask the general government to put into it. It's sometimes very overwhelming because it's a reality that when you live in the city, you don't see it so much unless you live in those neighborhoods, which I did actually. Well, you were there in Cerro Navia, which is a very vulnerable community, and I used to live there. But this is something else. I've seen homes with no windows, with windows covered in plastic. That kind of vulnerability I'm talking about. Or homes where the bathroom is outside the house and it's a direct hole to the ground, not a functional modern bathroom. Sometimes it's shocking, but try to not judge, not to despair, especially in front of people. Just make the best of it, of the experience of being together at that moment.
Oh, gosh, I mean, you've shared a lot, and I am feeling the responsibility that I'm hearing from you of holding space for this is a lot. I also appreciate that you have a team with whom you can enter into that and be able to witness this with dignity and respect and invite these individuals in conversation with you to help address their needs. Right. I also realize that just knowing doesn't always translate to that being heard and acted upon. But without that knowledge being systematized and expressed, it's too easy, I think, to look away, especially when so many of the decisions get made in urban spaces that are so removed. Even though you live in Chile, I think this is something that we see everywhere. And a lot of times I think these communities do feel invisible and unheard. So it speaks mountains to the level of empathy and that mirroring that you've been able to cultivate and that trust and relationship. Thank you for doing this work. You are an Atlantic Fellow for Equity and Brain Health. And
Mhm.
you, one of your projects, you collaborated with the Global Brain Health Institute, or GBHI, in Dublin, and Trinity College Dublin, alongside a housing association called Respond Housing Association. Can you tell us a little bit about what that project was all about? I'm also really curious to see what you learned and if there's anything that our listeners might be able to take away from what you've learned as a result of that.
Well, that's a dream, actually, and I have to say, um, I was over the moon working with them because Respond Housing, it's a nonprofit organization which creates and builds and manages accessible, affordable housing
Mm.
for people in Ireland. It's a wonderful organization because the way in which they work, it's with such quality. I hope that some of the people that are listening have the opportunity in the future to visit one of the projects, or many if they want. I did visit some of them in different cities. I had the opportunity, and they are just wonderful because they don't only offer the housing, they also work on the community. They have housing for younger families and that mix with older people and immigrants, and it's very diverse. And they have other housing that is more for older people only, in which they have activities and care centers for them. So I think there's one for everybody, and they are wonderful homes. This is not like some social projects that you see sometimes in my own country that are very small, like no space, no gardens, no public infrastructure. This is just complete. And so it was wonderful working with them. And actually respond, how did this project come together? They reached out to GBHI. They did it because they were interested in what GBHI was doing about brain health, and they wanted to incorporate knowledge into what they do, this brain health aspect to housing. And so they sent people to GBHI to do some training. I think it was online though, but still. And then when I was doing my fellowship, they were starting this project. So they wanted to do pilot project in which they wanted to apply brain health considerations into one of the existing housing projects. And so we prepare for several months these workshops, what we're going to talk about, what we want to know, what we want people to talk about, but not so close though, like in a very open way. What are the issues that they encounter when we talk about brain health? Because we did an introduction at the beginning, like one session of introduction. What is brain health? What it affects? How do we see it in our everyday life? And then we got into the issues that might be related to that. And so it was wonderful. I think the biggest challenge for me at the time was that I was co-directing the workshops, but my English is not native. So I think that sometimes people might not understand what I was saying, and that might affect maybe the results. But I tried to do my best communicating, and there was other people too. But sometimes I look back and I think maybe if I ask this or that, or maybe if I mentioned this other thing that I didn't think at the moment because maybe it was difficult to say it in English, I would receive other kinds of response. But well, that's that. I mean, every project you have those kinds of thoughts. And then I finished my fellowship, and I'm in touch with the project, but I'm not working actively now. So I don't know if they managed to apply the recommendations that we co-created with the people of Rakhkoran, but I hope they did. And I think they probably did because they are very interested in this. They want their communities to thrive. They want their communities to feel like they belong, like they have a saying, like that is not that they're only living there. They are also shaping the environment themselves. So yeah, that was a great project. And then and it's still some other things happening. Like there's this other project that is going to be funded by the EU. The that is gonna look into all these systemic aspects: environment, climate change, migration, not your typical medical determinants of health, and how that impacts brain health. And that's going to happen in different countries, and we are a partner for that project. So I think in the coming 2 years there's going to be researchers from different countries coming to Chile, coming to these rural areas to see what we're doing, what to look for information, working with the communities. We still have to decide what is gonna be, but that's going to be very interesting. It's a very good sign that they take these kinds of projects into consideration because it's huge funding from the EU. And also at the end, I think it's going to do a great impact that a project this big, it's dealing with these issues, to say we need more funding for this, or maybe we need more professionals working on this, or we need more public policies about these topics. I think it's very inspiring right now, because in the past I found myself like I said at the beginning, fighting my way in, explaining why I'm here, explaining why the environment is important to people who should know. People should know that dementia is not just your body, and it's not just medical, and it's not just happening in your brain, that there are many factors happening at the same time. This is not an attack on people working in the medical field necessarily. It's just something that's happening, and that's been happening in countries like mine. At least there's been wonderful people supporting myself and that including me in projects, and seeing how important this is. But there are also people that are very, it's kind of like the topic, they own what is being done. And I get it, because it's been done like that for many years. I mean, dementia has been approached by the medical field for, I don't know, 90% of the time that it's been studied, probably. At least this is what I see in Chile. Like all the policies now that are related to addressing dementia are coming from the medical field. There's only a few that are not specific for people with dementia, but for carers, for example. It's frustrating because if you're an expert in dementia, if you are working with people with dementia, you should know that the more diversity you have to study dementia, I think the closer you are to finding solutions, or at least recommendations for people that are more focused on therapy and psychology and occupational therapy and support in other ways. But dementia specifically is owned by the people from the medical field. And so sometimes you find that they are a little defensive when it comes to the arts, when it comes to dance, when it comes to, I don't know, any other activity that is not therapy, like, as we say in Spanish, pura y dura, which is pure and hard, you know?
Like a
So yeah.
pharmaceutical approach or a medical approach?
Pharmaceutical or very medical, treating the neuropsychological symptoms or specific issues with occupational therapy, like walking or eating or speaking. And this is funny because even when I'm invited, sometimes I'm invalidated. I don't know why they will invite me if they know what I'm going to say.
I think not everybody recognizes the value of the things, but when somebody recognizes that what you're contributing is valuable, but they just don't understand, maybe because of the language or because of the system, this is a systemic thing, right? The system within which they work is maybe rigid around some of these things that you're suggesting need to be more flexible in order for the approach to be effective. Approaches that are more personalized rather than universalized.
Yeah.
Approaches that lean in on the interconnectedness of different systems internally and interpersonally, both with physical and social environments, right? That is much more complex.
It is.
And hearing that the work that you're doing with the GBHI and this community in Ireland, and to hear that you have this funding that is really looking at our global systems as a system too, right? We're not just isolated countries, we're all interconnected, we're all part of this earth together, and increasingly so. And we're seeing many responses to the feelings of recognizing that. Some of them are in retreat and to try to create more kind of isolation internally, and others are addressing the fact that this is who we are, and we need to address some of those inequities and learn from each other. I'm delighted to hear that there's a team that will be coming to you and learning from you and working with you in the communities with whom you've cultivated relationships. It's fantastic.
It's amazing for the global south in general, I think, because Chile is not the only country from the global south that is collaborating in this project to include us, because a big part of the research that is being funded and done, it's in the north, in rich countries, if you will. So to get our perspective of things, will be a huge deal, especially when it comes to environmental design for people living with dementia, because most of the research being done has been done in rich countries.
Yes.
So I cannot just take one guideline from Australia and apply decide in Chile because there are unthinkable things there or expensive things that I wouldn't be able to say to someone, well, you should do this, you know,
Yes.
with what money?
It's
So yeah,
unrealistic.
exactly. And that is gonna be interesting working alongside them. And hopefully the idea that it's not gonna be an extractive project, but just come here, um, take the data and leave, working with the community. That's gonna be important.
Yeah.
Hearing from them, not from me, because I'm also looking at it with my own bias. I'm very excited about it, and kudos to all the people in this project, especially Owen Cotter. You know
Mm.
Owen from the Trinity side. He's the
Yeah.
lead educational expert. I always struggle with titles, especially in English, but he's amazing.
Yes.
And I dare say he was a mentor to me when I was in Dublin. I learned a lot from him. So if he's listening to this, thank you, Owen, for always considering my inputs and considering me as an important person for these kinds of projects.
He's an incredible person, but so are you. I appreciate that he saw that in you and invited you in. But gosh, I had a thought. If no changes are implemented, where we're likely to see the highest incidence of dementia in the next 25 years, it is in the global south. So it befuddles me that we are just now starting to engage in these conversations. But I'm delighted that we are, largely in part thanks to the Global Brain Health Institute and the many individuals like yourself and some of the folks I've had the privilege of meeting in these last few years for being, as you mentioned, problematic and standing your ground and demanding
Yeah.
that this is listened to. I was going to ask you what's on the horizon, but I feel like you've shared that. Is there anything else on the horizon that you'd like listeners to be aware of, or that ways that they can get involved or support this project or the work that you're doing?
Well, as you know, I have a baby, so I feel like work has been a little slow this past few months, but hopefully the following 2 years we can get more projects out about this because we developed an app a few years ago about environmental design for people living with dementia, for people who speak Spanish, basically for Latin America and Spain. But we found that the app is probably not the best medium to get to people. And so we've been thinking about other ways to get the information out and to make environmental assessments easier for families and for professionals. So yeah, we've been meaning to design a new tool and we haven't been able, also because you need resources. But yeah, hopefully we can start this year or next year so we can get to more people. It's more accessible, the
Yeah.
information. So yeah, that's a huge goal, met goal so far.
Well, it's a massive one, and I'm hoping that if anybody listening to this happens to have resources that they could bring to help build
Hmm.
Maka's app, please reach out to Maka. Her contacts are in the show notes.
Hmm.
Congratulations on your growing family and your
Oh, thank you.
baby. Yeah. So, as we're closing up, I want to finish with one question. We've been talking a lot about design, these very applied, relational, co-design approaches that you've been engaging
Hmm.
in with communities. But behind all of this, it feels like it's a very creative practice. And I'm privileged to have had the opportunity to connect with you and to witness some of your artistic expression very directly.
Hmm.
And as you know, our podcast is all about dance and brain health, but more
Hmm.
widely arts and brain health. So I'm curious to ask about your personal experience with this. Specifically, if you might reflect on a time or an experience, either one that you have experienced on your own or one that you've witnessed, where you felt the magic of either dance or the arts on health and well-being.
I think that with dance specifically, my first approach with the purpose of bringing you together to brain health was when I was doing my fellowship. I
Mm.
didn't experience these kinds of activities before. I dare say there's nobody doing that in Chile. So for me, it was very new, strange. Obviously, I knew it existed as a practice. There were projects like yours because we were already in contact when I started my fellowship. I think we were on LinkedIn. Yeah, and I saw all the work you do. But then when I started my fellowship, I was with Aline and Anusha, who are dancers, and I got to see them and I got to participate in some of the activities. We prepared a dance for Diwali celebration in Limerick. I'm not a great dancer. I don't consider myself a good dancer, and I'm very shy when it comes to dance or acting or that kind of artistic expression. For me, it was very new, but I enjoyed every activity I participated in. I think it was very fun, and what I get the most out of it is that it will bring you together with people.
Mm.
Because you're not dancing alone. Like you can dance alone in your house, but when you dance with people, when you're sharing that experience with other people, it's different, and it's more rich, and you remember it more.
Mm.
I remember clearly what we do, the dance that it was, the times that I saw you guys dancing, doing activities. So yeah, I think it was great. And also we did this activity in Cerro Navia, which
Mm.
for me was amazing because it wasn't just, well, we're gonna dance and dance is positive for brain health. You did a whole class about the importance of dance for brain health and what are the benefits. And I think that is very um uh it's very complex,
Mm.
but at the same time it brings people closer to the topic,
Yeah.
because you get to have the class, but then you get to experience it,
Mm.
yourself, and you get to feel good because you're dancing. When you're dancing, you feel good. I don't think there's any dance that make you feel worse. And so I think that is a wonderful way to bring brain health home to people, to their real life and everyday life. You don't need anything to dance. You don't need big implements. You don't need um a big salon. You can dance with your partner, with your kids, with your grandkids. So yeah, I think all the experiences I had around dancing were always very positive. That is something. It's a sensation that you don't get always when you're studying brain health. Sometimes you feel overwhelmed with so much information or things that you don't understand or words that are too complex,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So when you mix it with the practice right after you learn something, I think it makes a lot of difference. And it's probably like that with other arts. If you learn about brain health and then you do some other kind of art to apply that knowledge, it'll always be positive. It's not a waste to include these kinds of experiences when you're learning about brain health. It's always going to be a gain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you for articulating it that way. It's been wonderful to see and hear the many different experiences that you've had with Dr. Aline Haas, our dear colleague, and Dr. Anusha. Brilliant
All these doctors.
researchers and dancers. It was a privilege to meet the community at Serra Navia and to join with them. I hope that there is a way to carry that forward, maybe with somebody, in your community who would be able to take
Mhm.
that idea and make it even more meaningful because it's going to come from
Mhm.
within the community.
Mhm.
Um, Something that I also want to say, it's been a privilege, the artwork that you created in collaboration with us, with some of the communities here in New York that are living with dementia, and the gift of translating that sensitivity, that mirroring, that listening that you have cultivated so beautifully through your years of practice. One of these communities has the quilts that you made.
Mhm.
up on the wall in the center. It was so spectacular. So you're also a phenomenal artist, but it's almost like you were channeled the experiences of these communities into beautiful art. That's a very unique, and speaking of unique experiences, that's the first time I've
Mhm.
met an artist like yourself. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful to you for that.
Thank you so much for always having me in your radar. I appreciate you so much for that. Well, not only for that, because you're an amazing person too, and you're fun to be around, and you're very inspiring. I don't know how you do everything you do. When I grow up, I want to be
We
like you.
are though, Maka. I see the same with you.
It's amazing to meet people like you, and that you are so successful in everything you endeavor. I love to see it, and we need more of that.
That
Yeah,
I'm
something positive to add to our life now that everything is just crisis after crisis after crisis.
Oh, thank you. I'm really humbled to hear your reflections. I guess I'll say when you start with the things that you discussed earlier, when you enter into a community and they trust you and you establish a relationship and you offer opportunities for them to take on and speak their truth, then the success takes care of itself.
Mhm.
And I hear you about the work that you're doing. That's exactly the same thing. You are also successful. I'm so deeply grateful that you shared so much of your time. May more people learn to be problematic like you, Maka.
I hope so. We need more problematic people. Yes.
Mm. Thank you so much again, Maka.
Thank
And
you.
until we see each other again.
Thank you so much.
This episode of Dancing into Brain Health was edited and produced by Magda Kaczmarska and Hilary Brown Estreffi. The music for this show is the title cut from the album Critical Path by Joe Venegoni and Carl Weingarten. Show notes, links, and resources from today's episode can be found on the Dancing into Brain Health webpage and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.